Siko, welcome back all to chapter 12 of Mad Bear. Empathy. Main thing is, you gotta stay lighthearted if you want to be good-hearted. Joe Friedman reached me in Topeka and introduced himself on the phone. I hope you don't mind me calling you. You never answered my letter. I was expecting your call, I told him. I heard you were trying to reach me through the Manager Foundation, so I asked them to have you call here. Anyway, what I wanted to talk to you about now was the possibility of contacting Rollin' Thunder. I'm taking this summer to drive around the country, and I was thinking it might work out for me to stop by his place while I'm out that way. Do you think you'll be coming anywhere near here on this trip? I asked. If so, maybe you and I could meet first, before you meet Rolling Thunder. Joe and I arranged that he would phone me again from somewhere on the road when his schedule was more definite, and we might then make plans to meet in Topeka. I had allowed a somewhat hasty commitment, I realized as soon as I had hung up the phone, but Joe had made a good impression, and I had felt sorry that I had either missed or forgotten his letter. He was attending medical school in Florida, he had told me, and he was planning to use the summer for some broadening exploration and experience. It was a purposeful as well as an interesting plan, I thought. When I heard from him again, several weeks had passed, and he was already in Colorado. I came the southern route, he explained, but it doesn't matter. Like I told you, my schedule is pretty much open at the moment. I'm right near Denver. 2 days after that, he called me again from a restaurant a couple blocks from where I was staying in Topeka, and I walked down the road to find him sitting at the counter with a cup of herb tea. I said, if you drove out here from Denver with a plan to visit Rolling Thunder in Nevada, you sort of come out of your way. We sat in my living room, on the floor, as was his habit, and talked for hours. By the time he carried his sleeping bag in from the van, we had arranged a whole new set of plans. He was indeed free, as he had said, at least for the rest of the summer. But he did have a purpose in mind and an ideological direction he intended to pursue. For my part, however, I was going east, not west. I had a commitment at Slippery Rock State College in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, to do a series of seminars for the Health Science Department. It was part of their summer program. From there, I was heading up to Mad Bear's. Joel decided he would like to make that trip, and he was willing to be the transportation. This arrangement was an advantage to me, in terms of both economics and convenience. Having our own transportation would allow more options than a complicated schedule of short flights. Over the hours that we sat on my living room floor, we came up with some ideas for what he was trying to do that would fit comfortably into my own schedule. So we planned an itinerary to accommodate both of our agendas. Joe was hoping to find an alternative approach to the art of healing, and he wanted to explore native medicine as a possibility for his own practice. I don't know how familiar you are with med school or med students, he said. It's totally institutionalized, like commerce or industry. Believe me, you can hardly find any soul or compassion anywhere. I could really relate to these ideas you wrote about. I haven't done much reading in this area, but there's nothing in our texts or lectures or discussions or even among my classmates or friends that relates to the most basic and essential values. At least not to mine. I mean, I feel like I left my soul on a shelf, and years later, when I go back to get it, it's not going to be there. Or even worse, after years of med school, I won't even want it anymore. Maybe it doesn't have to be that way, I suggested. I had thought about the physicians and healthcare professionals I had come to know at places like the Council Grove Conference and the Manager Foundation, and the managers themselves. I thought about Jim and Larry Davis, who had invited Mad Bear and Gison to Council Grove. They lived and worked in Indianapolis, more or less on the way to Slippery Rock, so we added them to our itinerary. Within a couple of days, it was all arranged, and we were packed and on our way, from Topeka to Toronto to the Tuscarora Reservation, with stops along the way. At the Himalayan Institute near Chicago, we sat in a doctor's office and heard a medical opinion that was intended to encourage Joel in his medical pursuits. Rudy Ballantine, MD, was not only a practicing physician, but also a homeopath and a recognized expert in diet and nutrition, and was accomplished in such ancient Eastern disciplines as yoga and Ayurvedic medicine. I had met Rudy Ballantine first at Swami Rama's ashram near Rishikesh, India, and had come to know him over the years through my contact with the Himalayan Institute. Since Chicago was an easy first stop on our northeastern trek, I had thought it worth our while to visit the training classes and the clinic at the Himalayan Institute. But if Joel was looking for justification to leave medical school in favor of some alternative pursuit, he could not expect to find it from a practicing physician. Not even this holistically oriented physician who also practiced homeopathy, yoga, and meditation. People of all kinds and descriptions parade through here every day, the doctor told us. They take off their clothes and bare their very hearts and souls to me. I am privileged to be able to witness the depth and breadth of human makeup and experience. Every day is a wonderful and fascinating learning opportunity for me. Every day provides an opportunity to serve people, to help people. It's my MD that allows me this opportunity, that legitimizes it. Within the limits, laws, ethics, and good taste, I can do as I see fit, as my best judgment tells me. I have the whole spectrum of alternatives at my disposal, from the conventional to the most ancient or modern alternatives. Being a physician doesn't subtract from my options. On the contrary, it adds. I do some things in the course of my practice that don't require a medical degree, but these procedures still are more effective, more substantiated and supported by the fact that I am a physician. I can reach people in ways that only a doctor can. Jim and Larry Davis endorsed and expanded upon what Rudy Ballantine had expressed. We sat for hours in their living room in Indianapolis. They were physicians and psychiatrists with the Community Hospital Mental Health Center and ran the Davis Psychiatric Clinics. I had last seen them only months earlier at the Council Grove Conference. Joel listened as they recalled their encounter with Mad Bear at the conference and hoped aloud Mad Bear might offer a different sort of encouragement. It seemed to me, as we continued on our way, that Joel was looking forward more than ever to talking with Mad Bear. The doctors had made sense and had tried to be encouraging. But Joel had not heard enough. He needed to learn something about what else is there. If he were to remain in his contemporary setting, he needed at least something to anticipate, something to look forward to sustain him in his efforts. I was curious myself what Mad Bear might have to say to a non-native medical student. I knew he would not suggest that Joe drop out of school and take up native medicine, but, unlike the doctors with whom we had just spoken, Mad Bear could easily volunteer some comments that could serve to make the years ahead even less tolerable for Joel. In any case, that meeting would come later. We were on our way to spend nearly a week at the State College in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, and from there to visit Dorothy McLean and others in Toronto. It's been good to get on the road, for a change and not through the air, and still to have enough time to make these extra stops, I told Joel. But I have no idea what these next days are going to be like. You're welcome to sit on any of the talks and the seminars if you want, but you should feel free to go on your own and do whatever you want. Well, we'll see, Joel replied. I'll feel it out. I'll tell you the truth. I'm curious what you're going to do with a topic like witchcraft, or even more, what a topic like that's doing at a state college school of nursing. Me too, I said, but like I told you, it wasn't my idea. That was the topic they had chosen for the summer session, so that was the topic they gave me when they invited me to participate. Yeah, but they're not expecting the way you're going to handle it. Maybe not, but I gave them a pretty detailed outline, so they shouldn't be surprised. I told them I'd never use a title like that, but that I could offer what I had to offer, and they could call it whatever they wanted. Actually, it could fit well under the heading of witchcraft in the fullest meaning of the word. Witchcraft isn't what most people suppose it at all. That's what I mean. The talks in the auditorium each morning were required for credit, and the afternoon workshops were optional for whoever wished to attend. The program was open to both graduate and undergraduate students from all the departments, and to health professionals from the surrounding community. Both Joel and I went to the auditorium on Monday morning to attend the opening session. There were announcements about the schedules and the campus rules and policies, and then the introductions of the morning speaker. A professor gave a lecture about the superstitious belief in witchcraft in early American history. He taught everyone the names of some people who had been accused of being witches and gave various details regarding their so-called trials. Then he revealed the names of those who were found guilty and dictated the dates of those who were executed for the participants to put down in their notes. People occasionally raised their hands to confirm the spelling of the more difficult names. After the morning session, the professor who had invited me introduced me to the professor who had spoken. I didn't think I'd meet. Well, I didn't know you were going to be here already this morning, was all he said, and he walked away. This is about what I expected, Joel commented as we walked across the campus to the cafeteria. In other words, I don't think you're what they're expecting. That was all names and dates, probably dug out of some history book somewhere. There wasn't a single concept of any kind presented, one way or the other. But it didn't seem like anybody noticed. I think these people are here for credits, not for concepts. Who knows, I said. That guy won't be around for any of my stuff, I don't imagine. The people that I talk to know what I'm going to do because I sent them a description. And who knows what these participants are like. Maybe we'll reach beyond their expectations. They shouldn't mind, they'll still get their credits. Well, I'm gonna sit in on it. There's nothing else I want to do here anyway, and I'm curious to see how it's going to go. See, this is exactly what I've been talking about. Education is so institutionalized. Most of it is just rote memorizing. Where's the thoughtfulness? Where's the caring and the humanity? You know, you might find the afternoon sessions relevant. That's what we'll be dealing with in a way. I was going to do some sort of a mini version of the Technique of Seeing workshop, or at least that's what I'd thought. I started doing that as a weekend workshop about 10 or 12 years ago, and I've been doing it ever since. I used to just do talks. Stories, I guess, true stories about swamis, shamans, yogis, monks, and medicine people. I thought people might find them kind of inspiring. One day, a group of us, teachers mostly, got to talking about how people can come to resent being stirred or turned on as much as they resent being force-fed an endless stream of bare and empty facts. Whether it's a speech, TV, LSD, mushrooms, or whatever, people don't want simply to be fed impressions by some external influence. They want validation. They want to expand their own direct experience, and they want to know that it's really them and not something else, not just something they ate. People have often responded to the stories with bewilderment or even with frustration. It was subtle and hard to pick up, and at first it was hard to understand. It wasn't a matter of suspicion or skepticism, which would be okay with me. Anyway, because I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. People felt excluded. They wanted to know how they could have an experience, how they could meet a teacher or find a path. People long for direct encounter. Exactly. Me too. Do you realize that direct encounter has been almost entirely eliminated from our lives? Especially from the learning process. Do you realize how much this has cost us? We become the passive receptacles of second-hand descriptions and simulated displays and depictions. Something like computers, except not quite so efficient. And we wonder what's happening to empathy. That's what I've been talking about. And I don't want it to be done to me. Not even a little bit. Direct encounter. That is one basic aspect of native medicine, or native wisdom. Like Rolling Thunder once said, you can't just sit down and talk about the truth. Truth is something you experience. It's not just something to look at. To people like Mad Bear, you'll see, understanding is very different from disinterested observation. It's not simply a matter of noting and committing to memory. Understanding is nothing less than a participatory experience. It's a two-way rapport, a mutual relationship. That's exactly what I'm looking for, Joel said, as we walked through the food line at the cafeteria. That's why I wrote to you. That's why I'm here. But it seems to me, I went on, that we have a ways to go before we can just start chasing after an experience, especially if it's to involve medicine people or some other culture. We have to put aside our old mindsets. We have to step out of that mold you just called institutionalization and develop a more realistic approach to observation and cognition. Anyway, that's how that workshop got started. It was supposed to be a response to those who were looking for an experience, an attempt to explore the technique of observation, of really seeing. We call it description-free perception. For example, from what I've seen, when native people are walking in the woods or the fields, I don't think they're constantly giving descriptions to themselves like we do. I can't imagine them thinking, this is a this or that kind of a tree, and there's a bird. It's gray and a white and it's got spots, so it's such and such bird, a member of whatever family. I don't think they're constantly giving descriptions to themselves like we always do. It's become a habit with us, but it's not the natural way. It's not the native people's way. What do? Just listen. Let the tree or the bird introduce itself in its own way. I'll do that. Okay, let's try it. I don't know who we'll have to work with, but let's try it. You mean with these people? How? I don't know. We'll just try it. The morning talks were the usual storytelling format, but they were real stories about real people, just as historically accurate as the professor's opening lecture, yet with some implication or concept, as Joel had put it. I left it to the participants to consider the implications and draw their own conclusions. Guest speakers have no responsibility for student evaluations or grades. I had been informed. I knew the students would have to write and turn in something based on these sessions, but I would be gone. As I stood on the platform, I could barely see the faces of my listeners. I had no way to know what they were getting other than their credits. The one thing I could tell, because I had asked for a show of hands, was that nearly all of what I had proposed for their consideration was news to them. For the most part, these students were unaware of the meaning of witchcraft. They did not know what shamans were, or even swamis. They did not know the meaning of yoga or meditation, and they had never heard of the Dalai Lama, Don Juan, the Aquarian Age, or the Whole Earth Catalog. Also, for the most part, these students did not come to the afternoon workshops. These were not for credit. Those who did come were not students. They were nurses mostly, or teachers, or parents, or all of these. Just outside the room where we met was a small meadow-like area with a small trees and bushes, and across the road nearby, a larger field. It would not be like walking in the woods exactly, but there were living things to talk to and listen to, and enough space that people could feel somewhat private. Part of the technique of seeing, I told them, and I'm using seeing in the deepest sense, is to reach out strongly, to extend yourself, and at the same time to be still enough and open enough to be really receptive. You have to refrain from internal chatter, from constantly giving yourself descriptions. You have to refrain from saying, this is a tree, or this is a bush, so that you can listen. We can all admit we could be better listeners, but we're just thinking of our conversations with other people. Everyone agreed to experience, or at least experiment, with listening to plants. I knew this sort of research was far from the usual health science department curriculum, and though this was an optional activity, I would not have proposed it without unanimous agreement. I also knew that, as Joel had observed, everyone who had enrolled in this summer program, for credit or otherwise, had not expected anything like what we were about to do. Not only the exercise itself, but also the results were unexpected, and it was this fact. I believe that it made this work. Not only the exercise itself, but also the results were unexpected, and it was this fact, I believe, that made it work. None of the participants were into this sort of thing, and aside from agreeing to try it, no one had a chance to develop any anticipation or mindset one way or the other. We jumped right into it, but we took it one step at a time. The first step was to go out, walk around and choose a tree, a bush, or a plant. The next step was simply to sit and hang out with it for a while. People came in and out, back and forth, for their step-by-step instructions, always returning, again and again, to the same plant. At first, they considered suggestions as to what to say to their plant. Eventually, they reported they were able to speak freely to their plant, out loud, and without feeling self-conscious. Over a period of several hours and many encounters, they began to feel that they were establishing a genuine rapport with their plant. Eventually, the plants responded. The final step was to do nothing at all but sit and wait. Eventually, the plants responded. The final step was to do nothing at all but sit and wait, 20 or 30 minutes if necessary, until the plant offered its own response in its own way. It doesn't matter what happens, we reminded ourselves. It's now up to the plant. People drifted back into the room, one by one. Some were smiling, some were ecstatic, some were nearly weeping. "Nothing like that has ever happened to me," one woman said, but almost no one felt a need or desire to speak. We repeated the exercise with different people several times over the week, and then we left town. "I wonder what the college would think about that," Joel said, as we were back in his van and on our way. "I bet none of them will talk about it, except maybe to each other. It's a good thing they didn't have to turn in some report to get credit for that part." "Right," I said, "especially if the credit depended on some professor trying to evaluate what actually happened. Of course, we don't know for sure ourselves what happened. No one ever does. We could discuss forever whether people had been set up to imagine something that never really happened. But that could be said about virtually every perception. One thing is for sure, everyone experienced something. Whatever it was. They all did something they had never done before, and they were all moved by it. And they'll likely go on with it. They'll all have to determine the implications for themselves." We drove across the Canadian border and checked into a hotel in Toronto. I called Mad Bear and told him we would be with him in a couple days. Then we phoned Dorothy McLean and told her we had arrived. She was expecting us and had set aside the following day for us. Dorothy was, along with Eileen and Peter Caddy, a founder of what had become internationally known as the Findhorn Gardens, and had written about her conversations with the Devas, including the Devas of the unbelievably huge vegetables that had grown almost miraculously right out of the sands in her gardens. She was a native Canadian and had returned home after her years in Scotland. I had originally met her at one of the Council Grove conferences some years earlier, and I and my family had subsequently spent some time with her in her home near Topeka. Though Dorothy had only a day to spend with us, it was a fitting follow-up to our experience at Slippery Rock, and provided an additional bit of that something else that Joel was looking for. We spent the morning on our guided tour of Toronto, one of the few planned, and well-planned, at that, cities on the planet. "After lunch, we can walk down around in the ravine," she told us. During lunch in her home, we talked about the Devas. She was doing workshops in Toronto and elsewhere in which people were working with the process of contacting or perceiving the presence of the Devas, for themselves or for some constructive purpose. It seemed as though anything that could be called an entity or any sort had a Deva behind it. There was even the Deva of Toronto. In all our conversations, there was no concrete definition or description given for the Devas. The Devas were, apparently, something that you became aware of through some internal process. One need not define them in order to have some exchange with them. Dorothy explained that she had to give her own words to their communications, but that the information and instruction was not her own. As it was with her work at the Findhorn Gardens in Scotland, she and others continued to learn from these communications. In the afternoon, we drove through the town, parked near a ravine, and made our way through the trees down along the path toward the river at the bottom. A place like this is a godsend in a city, she told us. It's so quiet because it's below the level of the streets. You would hardly know there's a busy city right over our heads. People come here during their lunch hours or just to get away on a busy day. A place like this is so important. It's more than relaxing, it's nourishing. On that day, we did not see one other person. As we walked, mostly in silence, I thought about the Devas, though no one spoke of them. I wondered to myself how Dorothy thought of these trees and all these growing things, the birds and the river, and what the world was like for her. I can't really picture those Devas, whatever they are, Joel reflected later that evening as we returned to our hotel. Not that I can't conceive of their existence, I just can't picture them. I can't either, I acknowledged. Maybe they're not picturable, but I don't know that I've really tried to picture them. I have, I think, but I just don't get any image or anything at all describable. Yeah, but then we can't picture or describe a mind, an idea or a thought, or even consciousness itself. Well, maybe you can describe a thought, but you can't really picture it. No, actually, I think you're right, Joel resolved. You can't describe a thought, only its content. You can quote your own thoughts, but you can't picture or describe what a thought is other than its content. So you can quote a deva, whatever that is, but you can't describe it. You just know it's some kind of consciousness. We had made contact with Anyas, who was living somewhat near Toronto, and we were expecting him to join us for our dinner. I had not seen him since United Nations Day, when Mad Bear had brought him to New York. I had the telephone number of an acquaintance of his, and Anyas had phoned back when he received our message. But he was late, and we waited way past the dinner hour. When we could wait no longer, we left word where we would be, and we went to the dining room for a very late supper. Not long after we returned to our room, Anyas arrived. We gave up on you, I told him. We've just finished eating. It's okay, he said. I didn't want to eat. I came to see you. I didn't come to eat. He held out his hand toward Joel and said something in his own language. Anyas seemed different from our last meeting. He seemed serious and spoke so quietly, it was almost difficult to hear him. But how come you're so late? I asked him. It's been hours. It's almost the middle of the night. I'm carrying a pipe here, he said softly. So I walked. It takes hours. It's a long way. Anyas prepared a ritual, and he did it in a sacred manner. Everything was properly laid out. The sage and the sweetgrass were burned and the prayers were given, and we smoked the pipe there in the hotel room. Anyas hardly spoke the whole time, except for his hellos and goodbyes, and he left not long before dawn for his long walk home. The next morning, we pulled in at Mad Bear's place at the Tuscarora Reservation. My God, it looks like a fort, Joel exclaimed as soon as he saw the cinder block house with its barred windows. What is this, protection or something? Mad Bear's place had been shot at, but never through, and no one had ever succeeded in breaking in, though attempts had been made. As his own friends and relatives had often said, it's impossible to tell if he's even in there. He could be dead, and none of us would even know it. That was the way Mad Bear wanted it. Well, like you said about me at Slippery Rock, I told Joel, Mad Bear may not be what you expected. I haven't got any particular expectation, Joel said, but he did look surprised, or at least amazed, when Mad Bear came bouncing out and rushed up to the van with a grin that seemed almost as large as the windshield. Unless one knew him well, one could never guess that Mad Bear often preferred to be left alone. He always appeared so delighted at the sight of visitors, one could think he had been holding his breath waiting for someone to arrive. Mad Bear yanked open the door on my side, and Joel and I both got out to shake hands. By golly, he said, it's good to see yous both. Perhaps uncertain of the best thing to say first, Joel immediately gave him the tobacco he had brought for him. So, you're the doctor. I have heard a little something about you already. Well, I'm not a doctor. Sure, you're a doctor. Mad Bear gave me a mischievous look. And Doug, do you still belong to that weird cult or no? What? What cult? I asked. Well, where's your ring? Don't you still have that ring? I don't know, I answered, looking at my hand. I guess it's somewhere. I don't really care. And I don't belong to anything. You know that. So you can wear it if you want. You got nothing to worry about. I'm not. What ring? Joel asked. Never mind. I'll tell you later. We sat down on a long metal bench on Mad Bear's front porch and looked over the front yard, across the road and across the field beyond. It was a beautiful late summer afternoon. Every few moments a car went by along the road in front of us. Occasionally one would honk its horn, but Mad Bear always raised an arm and gave a high wave whether it honked or not. Well, it's a nice day, he said. We can just sit out here for a while and enjoy the birds singing. Joel looked at me. There were no birds singing, we both realized. Perhaps I thought they'll come soon, at the approach of dusk, as I had sometimes seen happen here. But I had barely finished the thought when a large group of birds swept by and settled in the tops of the trees. It sounded cacophonous, like people at a party, all talking at once, trying to be heard above everyone else. We three just sat there and listened, as though their demanding tone had trapped our attention. They left in a mob, just as they had come, and then we did hear real birdsong. But softly, somewhere in the distance, we remained silent. After a moment, I spoke. We saw Anyas in Toronto, I reported. He seemed different. He is, Mad Bear replied. He is different. He's quite a kid. He's got a lot to him. Too much to him. Maybe, some way. But he's somebody. That guy is. How was Toronto? Good, I said. We were only there a couple of days, saw Dorothy McLean and Anyas. Then we headed down here. Mad Bear looked at Joel. That's all part of our Six Nations Confederacy, you know, all Haudenosaunee country. Mad Bear, Joel suddenly exhorted. What do you know about Davis? It startled me a bit. I had come to be aware of how Mad Bear and his people tend to duck a direct frontal approach, and I had also become aware that Joel's manner was somewhat forward, but I had come to like that in him. Whatever he said, and however he said it, it came out of a genuine caring, and there was always warmth in it. Mad Bear felt it. I could tell by the way that he responded. Davis. Mad Bear scratched his head contemplatively. I can't remember if we met. He allowed a very apparent grin. Joel looked at me as to have checked whether he ought to grin as well. I hoped these two would get used to each other quickly. No, I think I know what you mean, Mad Bear resumed. But tell me how you mean it. I guess you might know about the Feinhorn Garden? Dorothy was talking about Davis up in Toronto. Maybe they're what I might have called guidance or guardian angels. Or maybe they're the mind or soul of living things. Except a city isn't a living thing. Mad Bear held up his hand and silently gestured with a nod of his head to call our attention to a little bird that had landed on a flower almost directly in front of us. It was a furry-looking, thistle-like blossom, and the bird began picking at it vigorously, flicking its head to fling little bits of fuzz from its beak. Look at that, he whispered, leaning back and folding his arms over his large stomach. We watched. What do you think he's doing? He questioned us. Picking at the flower. He's doing his duty. Everybody has his part to play, and he's doing his part. He gets his reward. Gets helped himself in this process. But what is he helping out here? Spreading seeds. Right. He wouldn't be doing that if there were no purpose in it. But what do you suppose he thinks? What's his incentive? What? Nectar. There's tasty nectar down there at the bottom. Under all those seeds, he knows it's there and he's attracted to it. It's all arranged, see? It's a really neat arrangement. and we just see a little part of the picture. I mean, what's the flower for in the first place? What's its role? That flower getting picked apart, and it'll be gone pretty quick. One day the plant's gone, but its kind will be around. The ever-coming new generations. But for what? Who's behind all this? Devas? I got a real treat in here for us, by the way. Green tomatoes. I slice them up, and I got a way to bread those things that'll fry them just right. Absolutely delicious. And not only that, but they taste good too. Doug, I don't think I've made these for you yet. Just wait till you sink your teeth in. He turned his head and peered down the road, squinting. Uh-oh, he said. A car came slowly along the road, and Mad Bear stared at it. It pulled into the driveway, all the way up to the porch. Inside were two elderly ladies. Well, here's an interruption. Brief, I hope. Now, whatever you do, don't breathe a word about the green tomatoes. We'll just postpone it a bit. He nodded at the ladies in the car, but they just sat there. Come on, he said under his breath. Don't pretend you're hesitant. I know what you're here for. These two are my aunts. Wait till you see what they're up to. Mad Bear beckoned and the ladies got out and took two large bags from the car. It looked as though they had been grocery shopping. Mad Bear laughed out loud and jumped to his feet. Okay. Let's bring the stuff in here, and I'll put on some hot water. We went inside, and the aunts emptied the contents of their bags onto the little kitchen table. Homemade cookies and macaroni and cheese in a covered casserole dish. Several china cups and a little box of tea leaves. Mad Bear picked up a cup and held it toward the window. These'll work, he said. We bring our own cups, one of the ladies explained to us. They have to be right, not like he's got. Not glass, but you can see the light through it so it shows up like he has to have it. He gives a good reading. Has he done it for you? You know I don't do this for people, Mad Bear commented. This is not our traditional way. But he does it so well. Mad Bear, let these gentlemen try it too, but we go first though. They can if they want, he answered, placing a pot of water on the stove. But not now, later, and you'll have to leave one of your cups. I can't use what I've got here. Well, we can get it when we come back for the dish. We're leaving this macaroni for you, and there's enough for these gentlemen. We always bring in something good whenever we come over for tea leaves. Joel and I went back out on the porch so that the ladies could have their tea leaf readings, just in case, as Mad Bear had put it, there was something confidential. He gets a lot of visitors, I explained to Joel, as we sat down again on the metal bench. They're usually sudden and unexpected, and sometimes it feels like an interruption to me, when I've come out all the way and don't have that long to hang out. And then I remind myself that he's not here for me. He's here for his people. But tea leaf readings? I never would have guessed that people would come to Mad Bear to have their tea leaves read. Actually, this is the first time I've ever seen or even heard of him doing that. I have a feeling it's just something those ladies are into. Mad Bear's so accommodating. That's the thing. People come for advice, for medicine, for help in networking, because he knows just about everyone in the native world. Not to mention representatives and spokespersons of all kinds of cultures. People come for meditation, for conflict resolution, and everything else. Anyway, I think he likes it. Sometimes it gets to be a bit much, I guess. I've seen him sit in there with the lights off and pretend he's not home. And of course, you can't see in. Maybe once in a while it's been for me that he's done that. I don't know. But if someone he likes comes around, he just can't resist the contact. I can believe it, Joel acknowledged. He seems real personable and real outgoing, especially for an Indian. Of course, I don't know a whole lot of Indians. No, you're right, especially for a native. But in fact, he's got to be one of the most outgoing persons I've ever seen. He makes jokes and engages people all the time, everywhere. Like when we were in New York City, he was forever coming up with some of the off-the-wall remarks to make people laugh. We'd be going up and down on the elevators, and he'd say things like, "Good heavens, would you look at my shoes? You sure wouldn't know I shined them just this morning." And people would wiggle around to get a look at his feet, and he'd be wearing sneakers. Or we'd get in a crowded elevator and he'd say, 23rd floor, please. And everyone would look at him strangely, and someone would say, it only goes up to the 12th floor. Then he politely suggests, well, could you push the 12 and then the 11? Wouldn't that make 23? Everyone would look embarrassed for a moment, and then they'd laugh. At first I thought maybe he just wanted attention. It took me a while to realize it's part of his medicine. Medicine? How so? Public social behavior in our culture comes close to being pathological. I have thought that before I met Mad Bear. When I was living in Asia, I got used to seeing people behave communally, like family, even in crowds. Little kids on crowded buses would crawl up onto whatever laps were handy. People would hold one another's packages, or hold one another, literally on bumpy roads or quick stops. There is great similarity in the way natives are with one another, or the way all traditional people are, for that matter. In our society, we are swimming in a sea of public paranoia, and Mad Bear picks up on that. They stiffen up, hoping on hope that no strangers make the slightest body contact. We people are uncomfortable with one another. We don't like people, in general. If they're not our friends or in some given way associated, they're either yucky or scary. Remember we were talking before about empathy? That's Mad Bear's medicine. Empathy. That's what I was saying. The way we use the term medicine is totally different. Medicine has got to be something different from, or at least far beyond, what we deal with in med school. Medicine has got to be healing. I mean, really healing. You know, I've heard people say that the real traditional medicine people are reclusive, even among their own tribe, usually. Some say that authentic medicine people wouldn't travel all over the place, meet people and give talks and organize, and all that. But that's his medicine. He's a bridge maker. I know he's occasionally attended to injuries or illnesses, but that's not his real work. His real work is relationships. He wants to break this ice. This false isolation that makes us all strangers to one another and makes us dangerous to one another. I think the real medicine people from now on, I mean the real healer heavyweights, will be working on that level. Anything else will be working on what the natives call the tail end of the problem. But still, what gets me is this place here. I mean, it does look like some kind of fort. It's not very Indian, you know. But then the teepees and the wigwams or whatever, you just don't see them that much anymore. Well, I don't mean that, but you've got to admit, this place isn't much in keeping with his outgoing character. There is a reason for that, or several reasons. Like I said, sometimes he pretends he's not here. He has to in order to do what he does. And at times when he's really gone, people think he may be in there and he wants it that way. You know, sometimes I think he's really a bear. I'm not saying I'm convinced, but again and again, I've had hints from things he said or little glimpses I've had that he takes on a bear or bear-like form. Or maybe he uses an existing bear. In any case, I'm sure sometimes when he's gone for periods of time, his body is in here in his bed. He has ways to keep his body protected. He has a lot of special things for medicine, and another kind of medicine. These are things that are doctored, as he puts it, that no one should be able to get to or touch. Also, he does have some historic items and some turquoise and other things that are extremely valuable. So, he has his reasons. I guess I told you, people have tried to break in here or even to shoot him, and it never works. But why? He doesn't seem as though he'd have an enemy in the world. He doesn't, but they do. He has no opponents, but many people regard him as one. He's involved in a lot of issues and contests, here and I think on other levels. Some people may just want to rob him, others want him gone. Once there was a guy who tried to shoot him through his bedroom wall one night. It was supposed to be a drive-by shooting, and the guy stuck his rifle out the passenger side, shot, missed, and tried again. I don't think a bullet will go through that wall anyways, for a couple of reasons. Anyways, the guy had his eyes too long off the road and lost control, hit a tree, flipped over and wrecked his car and himself. So stories go around and that there's no way anyone can mess with Mad Bear. So was that because of Mad Bear's medicine? In a way, but only in a way. The way he deals with conflict is interesting. He doesn't ever try to put anything back on anyone. He just doesn't receive it. It's like in martial arts, you just step aside and your attacker trips and falls. It's the only righteous thing to do, to step aside. But Mad Bear's real medicine, I think, is what he calls simply friendship. He talks about friendship warriors and the weapons of friendship. He once told me about a time that a guy came at him with a knife, and he threw open his arms in friendship and they hugged. He says he doesn't want anyone to try that until they've learned it. But that's the learning that he believes we have to get on with now. Man, I was only thinking of things like nutrition and herbs and natural medicines. There's so much. This is just so much. It began to sprinkle lightly, and we became aware that the sun had gone down completely and it was dark. We went back inside. By the sound of the chatter coming in from the kitchen, it appeared that the ladies had had their readings. Joe went directly into the kitchen, perhaps hoping to witness some remnant or result of the tea leaf reading process. One of the ladies stepped out of the kitchen to urge me to join them and to have my fortune told while Mad Bear was in such a good form. No, I've had enough for now, I heard Mad Bear say. We can do that later, if they like. Right now, I want to bring down these lanterns I've got somewhere. Joe, look up on that shelf above the cupboard there. Do you see a couple of kerosene lanterns up there? Then he suggested to his aunts that they might want to get on their way over the road before the rain built up. Mad Bear, it's barely drizzling, one of them insisted. It's just a little mist in the air. The ladies looked comfortable and hardly in the mood for leaving. It's coming, Mad Bear proclaimed confidently. A good hard rain. Can't you smell that? Not really. Wonder why not? Must be the tea. Well, I just thought we'd have a little peace and quiet, Mad Bear commented as the ladies pulled out of the driveway. That's it for me tonight. How was that done? Joel inquired. I've heard of tea leaf readings, but I never seen it done. Well, it doesn't really matter. It's just how you read them. They drink the tea and the leaves are settled and stick on the bottom. Then you hold up the cup and read right through it. It's just how you look at it. It helps to look at something, but it doesn't really matter. If you can't pick up anything, the tea leaves aren't going to help you. But if you can, then it looks like there's some symbols in there. That's what these ladies want, that's what they believe in, so it works for them. What you're really reading is the people. It provides a chance to say a few things that might be helpful. And they accept it, since they asked. You can't do that with people except they ask. Well, you can, maybe, but it's not a good idea. It's not right. I wouldn't mind knowing a few things about my future, Joe intimated. Yeah, but it doesn't work like that. Some things are up to you, some things aren't. But there's always some amount of choice. The only reason for predictions is to do something about it. Maybe you can change it, or if you can't change it, or decide not to, then you prepare for it. Or handle it in some way. Speaking of which, let's light these things. He stood up and found a match with which to light the 2 lanterns on the table. You gotta be careful talking to people about the future. Sometimes it helps them, sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on how you tell it, and what they do with the information. Sometimes you might think you're reading the future when you're making your own image. So you might just start to bring up something about which you just then made up yourself. Other times, it can be sure convenient to see something coming before it hits. He placed one of the lanterns on the bench by the sink. Anyways, I guess you got your own future pretty much in your hands. I don't know, Joe reflected. Sometimes it doesn't seem that way to me. Some things depend on a larger situation. Our instructions are to pass our knowledge and our medicine on down through our own generations. We've been told that when the time comes for all healers to share, it'll be really powerful medicine we'll have. And it'll be medicine that'll help everyone. From the tribes to the nations to the planet. Everything. But we're also told that it can't happen for profit. Healing has got to get out of the for-profit business. I'm not talking about offerings and exchanges. I'm talking about greed. No sharing can be for selfish reasons, so it can't be like some kind of ambitious commercial venture. But I'll tell you, when the profit struggle is put aside, and that's coming up, the healing art is going to get really, really powerful, like it was in the past. But it seems to me, Joel said, that there's a better way to get some of these drugs, like some natural herbs that really work and don't have all the side effects. I'm learning about it. It would sure help a lot of people to share it. It's already there, Mad Bear declared. It's already accessible. Just then, there was a loud, startling crack and a flash. We jumped and the lights went out. Mad Bear stood up and looked out the window. Electricity went out all over the area. Looks like, but it'll come back on pretty soon. That's why we got these lanterns here anyways. But we'll want to juice it to cook our supper and for this coffee pot here. Although I've been known to cook on that wood-burning space heater and pretty good too. The natural medicines and medicine ways are all around us, Mad Bear went on, sitting down again at the table and talking in an epical tone of voice as though influenced by the alluring glow of the kerosene lamps. He proceeded to give a number of examples, beginning with the particular plant with which we had seen a bird interacting, and all the plants were personalized and given names and spoken of as beings in their own right. He described a list of diseases and their natural remedies and treatments, and I thought perhaps Joe was hoping to memorize these as one would the lists and tables in medical texts. But to Mad Bear, it was a matter of observation, communication, and acquaintance. All of these things are right out here, all around us. It's all available and nothing's blocking it, except, like I said, putting profit first as though that's the goal. That blocks so much. But then for our people too, it becomes hard to hang on to. There's a lot of influence against it, a lot of counterforce to our traditional ways. It made him think about diabetes, which in modern times had become a major concern for the native community, and he described the natural remedies with which he had endeavored to doctor his people. I recalled the conversation I had with him before he went out to the Council Grove conference. "Is that how you treat your own diabetes?" I asked. He looked at me strangely, and again I felt awkward and regretting having referred to his diabetes. My diabetes? What diabetes? Well, we've talked about it in the past, but you... Remember Ji-son first told me about it? Oh, that! That diabetes didn't belong to me. From time to time I've been doing that. I was only hanging on to that for somebody else. Then the lights came on. "What do you say we heat up that macaroni?" he suggested. "That ought to be delicious. And a few things I can put together. We've got those green tomatoes, but I don't want to merge those with this other stuff. You'd lose some of the effect. They kind of stand on their own, you know, but they're not quite enough for supper. We'd best save them for tomorrow." After the macaroni and a few other delicious things that Mad Bear hastily put together by opening some cans, more visitors dropped by. "Here we go again. I get so I can tell when someone's coming around," he announced, just before we heard the knock on the door. "I guess it's the lights that are on and I got the car parked out front there. These kids pass by and they see that I'm home, but they'll be okay. We're just kind of kicked back here anyways and they'll leave when I tell them." "Hey, Bear, what's happening?" came a loud voice the moment Mad Bear opened the door. "You guys come on in. I got visitors from out of town, so you can't stay too long, but maybe they like to hear about a couple of songs or whatever." The three young natives walked right into the kitchen, looking very much at home. They appeared to be about high school age. "So you got anything good left, Bear? Donuts or anything?" "Well, I'll put something out," he offered. "But we ought to sit out in the garage. There's not enough room in here." We all carried chairs into the adjoining garage, with the bed hoisted up and the car out in the yard. This was a larger space than the three small rooms in the house. Mad Bear carried a bowl of chips and a plate of cookies from the kitchen. We arranged our chairs in a circle, and a large washtub was turned upside down in the center. It appeared as though these visitors were accustomed to this ritual. With the three of them pounding out the rhythm as they sang, we were treated to an assortment of social songs, with Mad Bear joining in from time to time. "Oh, I almost didn't think of it," he exclaimed, snapping his fingers and jumping up from his chair. "I've got just the thing for this occasion. I think you guys might not have seen this. I had it put away, and I ran into it and dug it out the other day." When he returned, he was carrying a strange-looking contraption with an extension cord. "Let me just set this up here. This is something really exquisite here." "Oh my God, save us," groaned one of the kids. Mad Bear placed the thing on the floor and turned it on. It began to creak and clatter as the little electrical motor churned inside. It was an artificial campfire arrangement of plastic logs with some red cellophane and tinsel rotating around a light bulb inside. Mad Bear watched it contemplatively, trying to look serious. "That's totally ridiculous," another complained. "This supposed to be a fire pit or what? Looks like something some white folks would dream up." He looked at us. "Oh, excuse me, sorry." "Well, it's not exactly a sacred fire," Mad Bear conceded, holding back a chuckle. "But then we've got singing social songs in the cement garage anyways. You've got to admit, it's kind of stunning in a way, if you look at it just right." His three young friends were eventually able to ignore the thing enough to resume their drumming and singing, though the little grinding motor and the crinkling of the cellophane produced an incongruous background. They had a lengthy repertoire of songs, and they repeated a few of their favorites more than once. We had sat for nearly 2 hours when Mad Bear suggested it was time to retire. "That fire thing is pretty silly at that," he remarked when they had gone. "You would have thought they were a little bit put out, but actually, I think they actually got a kick out of it, to tell you the truth. These reservation kids, it's sure not easy for them. They're raised in a somewhat traditional way, but with school and TV and all, they have to figure out how to fit in and how to deal with their identity. Well, it's pretty rugged for everyone these days, I guess. Just how to be. It's not too clear anymore. And there's not enough support for people. But you can't take yourself too serious, no matter who you are or what you're going to be. Otherwise, it gets too heavy. Main thing is, you gotta stay lighthearted if you want to be good-hearted." "He's the one you gotta kind of get a kick out of," Joe commented after Mad Bear had gone to bed. "He's not exactly what I had expected. You're right about that, but he's more than I expected, not less. The way he eats though, man, that's gotta change. I don't know if I'm going to be able to handle those deep-fried green tomatoes." The time for green tomatoes came around the following afternoon, and Joel watched the preparation process with anxiety as Mad Bear lifted the sopping slices from the hot oil and blotted them on paper towels. "Here, take a plate and help yourself right off there," he prodded Joel, "and don't be shy. There's plenty more to go around. You're going to think you died, like they say, and went to heaven." "I'd love to try some," Joe said, helping himself to a couple of the smallest slices he could find. "But I can't eat too much today. I'm thinking I'm having a little problem with my stomach." "Well, you'll be all right pretty quick," Mad Bear assured him. "We'll fix you up." After his green tomatoes, Mad Bear insisted he try a second helping. Joe excused himself and left the kitchen. "He'll be okay," Mad Bear told me. "It's not so much the food, although it's partly that, 'cause he's not used to it. I think he's a little shocked and disappointed that I just don't eat organic health food." He might have developed his own ideas about how natives are supposed to be. Course he's right in a way, being a doctor and all. I've been told I don't have the best of diets, but then I do all right of living alone and on a budget and all. At least it's all delicious. You gotta give it that. Later that day, when Mad Bear's chance presented itself, he talked about natives and food, and I supposed it was partly in order that he might account for himself to Joel. "I don't know how much you've learned about our native history," he started, "but whatever you know that's true from our people, and not from your own schools." Speaking of schools," I interrupted, "I was going to tell you this a while back, and it slipped my mind. When I was out in Chautauqua, one of the women who was attending my sessions came up to me after her talk and asked me where she could find some indigenous sources for or educational materials about Native Americans. She told me she was a junior high teacher who refused to present to her class that section of American Indians even though it was part of the curriculum and included in the students' texts. She told me she was a junior high teacher who refused to present to her class the section of American Indians, even though it was part of the curriculum and included in the students' texts. She told me that she refused to include any materials or reference to American Indians in her class, and she purposely explained to the students that the reason they were to skip the part about American Indians. She said she refuses to teach falsehoods in a public school setting, and that her principal and the parents accept that. Well, good for her. Anyways, what I was going to point out is that many of the fruits and most of the vegetables that the white people know today came from Native Americans. The native people of the Americas had potatoes, tomatoes, every kind of bean, over 300 varieties of corn, and the list goes on. They all had these things for literally centuries before the white people made their first contact with them. So much of what you people enjoy today, here and in Europe too, including the majority of your natural diet, is part of your Indian heritage. And by the way, a lot of your so-called American heritage comes to you from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, including your form of government, with its 3 branches and 2 legislative houses, your Bill of Rights, that eagle symbol just like you see it today, and the colors red, white, and blue. Did you know all that? Joel responded, "No, I didn't know all that." Do you have any idea what the original people's diet was like over most of the centuries? From thousands of years ago? No, I guess not. Does anyone? Well, you're right about one thing. I do eat too much oil and butter and sweets and things like that. Most of our people do. I guess it's pretty impossible for us to eat like our ancestors did, even though our ancestors developed so much of the natural, healthy food known today. Even some of your historians have acknowledged that our people were unbelievably skilled botanists and horticulturists. But see, we knew these things that you were asking about before. These things worked by direct communication. See, those things you were talking about with that Dorothy up there, that's what it is. That's how it works. He stood up and opened the refrigerator. There's a lot of knowledge directly available to us, he went on, glancing over the shelves. That's why I say it's all available and not blocked. The commercialism blocks it. That's the only thing. This so-called industrial age brought along some knowledge, but it blocked out just a whole lot. If the motivation is mainly money, it changes everything. He suddenly caught himself and quickly closed the refrigerator. Speaking of food, here I am looking for something to eat. All this talking about food and diets makes us hungry all over again. He sat back down at the table and looked at his watch. But then, it's not too much longer till supper time, so we gotta be thinking about that pretty quick anyways. But it's not just the natural food, it's the natural medicines. The natural medicines that have been discovered and developed over so many centuries. Look at the accounts of all the doctors that first came over right after Columbus. The natives of those days, and long before, had penicillin and all kinds of antibiotics, and natural herbs of all kinds of things. All that is still here too. Nothing's gone. All the medicine we need for every healing, for every personal or social goal is right out here, all around us. It's only blocked in the sense that some people personally block it. Just like our natural history threatened religion and politics over the years, our natural medicines threaten the medical industry today. And yet, it's right out here for the asking. So in that sense, it's not blocked at all. Never can be. And it doesn't belong to natives or anyone exclusively. It belongs to nature and to life. That's all. So you don't have to figure what kind of a doctor to be or how to go about it. Just ask nature and the natural way, and when the time is right, it'll explain itself to you. For a while, we sat quietly, and even Joel had no questions. So, you guys hungry yet, or no? We had an early supper and went to bed early and got up early so that we could be on our way. Mad Bear was up even earlier and had our breakfast ready. Now here, looky, I got scrambled eggs with tomatoes and onions and wheat cakes cooked on up. I got 'em keeping warm in here, so it's all good and natural for you this morning. And you feeling pretty alright today or no? However, at least a couple of us here are gonna have some coffee though. So I got that going here. Just before we left, he called to Joel. Come on in here for a minute. I got a little something for you. It was a beaded necklace that he had told Joel had something special about it because he doctored it up a bit. And you should wear this next to your skin for about 3 days so you can get used to it and don't take it off. After that, you can wear it in or out or have it on or off, but don't let anyone touch it. Joel slipped it over his head and tucked it under his shirt. He seemed pretty sure that I'd be seeing him again, Joe said as we pulled out onto the road. I don't know, I hope so. But look back there in the driveway. Man, you can see that grin from a long ways away. That is the end of the chapter. Yawa for listening, my friends. Take care. The best to you.